Welcome back to Soundwell Guitar. Today's lesson is going to be on fingerpicking. That means we won't be using a flat pick this time. We will be using the direct tips of our fingers. So affecting a tone out of the guitar with the direct tips of your fingers has endless possibilities. Different styles of music and different sounds can be created mastering this technique. On my right hand, you might notice in some of the close-ups, I have nails on this hand. I'd encouraged you in previous lessons to keep the nails on the left hand short so as to not get in the way of the fretting. But when we're picking, the nails can be very helpful for getting a brighter tone out of the guitar, but is not necessary when finger picking. The nails on my right hand are not cosmetic. They are purely for the sound that I'm trying to get out of the instrument. And in this case, I'm using a nylon string guitar, which the nylon strings tend to be a fairly warm but kind of dull sound and not very bright or loud, unless in fact they're plucked with the tips of the fingers followed by the nail. In fact, I would like to talk a little bit about that just to start, because I get that question a lot from people. Are we supposed to pluck the strings with the nail itself, just the nail by itself, or do we use the tip of our finger in some way? The answer is we use both. I think there were some arguments maybe 100, 150 years ago where some people grew the nails very long and just plucked with their nails, while others didn't use nails at all. They used the fleshy tip of their finger to pluck the strings. But what I'm doing is a combination of both, and I believe it was Andres Segovia that really made this the standard. When you pluck the string, you're going to have the fleshy tip of your finger engaged in the string, and when you pluck it, the nail just follows. The nails are just there. I don't even think about them when I'm playing, so don't let the whole nail thing bog you down at all. It's pretty simple. Once you grow them out a little bit, they'll just create a different sound and you won't even know that they're there, at least when you're playing guitar. Day-to-day life stuff, they can be a little bit annoying. Okay, well, let's get started with first we're going to talk about the digits on our right hand. We've already established a system for naming the digits on our left hand with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. You probably remember that on previous lessons. Well, what we need to do for the right hand is come up with a different system, not one using numbers, so we don't confuse the two hands. We're going to use letters for our right hand. The thumb is known as P. I didn't make this up. It's the letter P. If you see any guitar music and there's a P written next to the note, it is an indication that that note is plucked with the thumb. The index finger is known as I. That's a little bit easier to remember because index begins with the word or the letter I. Same with our middle finger is known as M. And then the ring finger is not called R, it is called A. Now, again, the I, M was real easy, index and middle, those are easy to remember, but the P and the A can be a little confusing. The reason for this is this really isn't in English. It's in Spanish. Interesting little history on the guitar though. Why Spanish tends to be the standard language for guitar terminology is not because the Spanish invented the guitar. It was the French that invented the guitar. But the Spanish popularized it. So they kind of got to decide what was what. So that's just the established norm for identifying the digits on the right hand when finger picking. P, I, M, A. If we wanted to use the full Spanish words, it's pulgar, indice, medio, and anular. However, knowing the full names isn't essential for mastering this technique, but you do want to remember the P, I, M, A. Notice I haven't said anything about the pinky. It's because we're not going to use it. It can be used in some cases, but there's a lot of amazing guitarists out there. Andres Segovia is one of them. I don't believe he ever used it. So interesting, we have a digit there on our right hand, but we just don't need it. Let's talk briefly about how we hold the guitar. You might notice that I have it on the left leg, and I actually have my leg elevated here And I've done that by, I've got this footstool here. You can buy one of these at any local music store for about 10 bucks. That's very helpful though for elevating the left leg. That is the leg that props up the guitar. It's much more stable that way. If you don't have access to a footstool like that at the moment, I just encourage you to put a book underneath your foot. A lot of times I see students of mine, when they opt to not use the footstool, they say that they feel more comfortable that way, but then they're playing with their left foot on the toes, you know, so it's almost like they're like a ballet dancer elevating their leg, and it looks extremely uncomfortable to me, and I would think you'd get tired after a good 2 hours of practicing like that. So it's always good to just prop it up. I think my first footstool that I ever had was I went and grabbed a log off of my wood pile and just put a log under my foot. Anyway, so that's the idea then. The guitar is elevated, and while it's on this leg, everything's right out in front of me like this. It's definitely a different feeling than when we're playing like the electric guitar and the flat picking and it was over on this leg. So everything's kind of over on off to the side now. That works really well for the flat picking. The funny thing is I actually sometimes do prefer to play like this even when I'm doing flat picking stuff. It has something to do with just the way that the neck is angled, and then I can get my fingers in a little bit better. You can play around with them. I'm not going to say one's right or the other is wrong. I just know that what's worked best for me, and I've seen a lot of other great players do the same things, and I've learned these techniques from them. Okay, so once we've got the guitar in place here, we've got our footstool, everything's out in front. Let's talk about the posture of our right hand. This is critical for getting the optimum sound out of your instrument. The angle of your fingers will determine whether or not you have a professional sound or an amateur one. Okay, so the guitar is really not a very loud instrument to begin with, so our technique in this instance is vital for getting the right kind of volume to be able to project and get the kind of tonality that we're looking for, and also control. Here's the posture I'm talking about. For many, including myself, it was extremely awkward at first. I had been playing with a pick for so many years that I had the habit ingrained in me of always holding my hand like this, because I was doing palm muting and whatever, and I always had a pick in between these fingers, and I always had to keep it angled like this. Now, the first mistake that I made when I first tried to learn this technique is I just figured I'd put the pick down, put my hand back in place without the pick, and then just start picking that way. Well, the problem with that is when I do that, if you can see, my fingers are really bunched up and angled kind of funny, and not really angled even the way that a pick would be. If I were picking with it in my hand, the pick would be angled straight down at the strings in order to pluck them straight on. That means if we want that same angle on our guitar, we're going to need to put our fingers in at that same angle. Now this is the part that I found extremely awkward. It's this whole idea with putting an arc in your wrist to angle the fingers behind the strings, and then they're all lined up. You see that? It's almost like they're all the same length now when I do that. If I'm at this angle, there's a disadvantage. They're all, again, like they're just kind of jumbled up, can't really reach the strings evenly, but we rotate in like this, and our fingers are lined up on those strings evenly. Also, we're behind the strings, being able to get optimum volume. Okay, so I'm going to show you a trick that really worked well for me to get myself into the correct posture. Again, this whole formation is vital. It's something you're going to want to keep double checking every time you play to make sure that you are in this posture until it just becomes an unbreakable habit. I had played for years doing it the wrong way, and breaking this habit was so difficult, but worth it in the end. The trick that I want to show you involves just remembering that this part of our arm is what rests on the guitar. If you find your elbow coming back down below the guitar, I see a lot of people doing that, it's a lot harder to do it. Just remember your elbow is back this way. You got that high arc here on the guitar, and we want our elbow above that, maybe somewhere about right in that angle there. Once you rest your arm on the guitar there, make sure your shoulders are relaxed. Drop your hand down. Just let it just dangle there. Just like let it hang loose. Now bring it up towards you onto the strings. Now I'm aiming my first finger, not first finger, index or eye. I've got it pointed right at this pretty circular design around the sound hole that's called the rosette. And that's about where you want that. There are other variations on this for different tonal color, but right now we're gonna just do it in this position. I call it neutral position because it's just kind of the standard place that you would start out and generally play just the most standard sound on a classical guitar. So you got it angled right there. I'll do that one more time again. I bring my arm down and I rest it on the guitar, elbows back here, shoulders are relaxed, and I drop my hand down and I bring it straight up. Okay, I'm just going to tilt the guitar towards you so you can see then how my fingers are angled at the strings. Now, it's also important to note that I put my annular finger on the first string, and I've got my middle finger on the second, and I've got my index on the third, and I got my thumb on the sixth. This is just a good place to start out and get a feel for that posture. I want to put up too just an image of the first person perspective on what this technique looks like. It's another thing to reference as well, so you can double check the posture of your right hand to make sure that you have it angled right. This picture has been very helpful to me and many other people as well. Notice when you look at the picture, the way that the fingers are angled at the guitar, and there's the arc in the wrist, and then the thumb is just kind of out a little bit to the left. So it's just pointing just a little bit closer to the sound hole maybe than the other fingers are. You want that. You want a little bit of separation there. Okay, we're going to start first. There's a variety of different techniques we can do with the finger picking. The first one that we're going to do is known as Apoyando. Apoyando is another Spanish word, and in fact this word I believe means supporting, or it's in English known as the rest stroke. So the direct translation of the word apoyando means supporting, but then when we refer to this technique in English, we call it the rest stroke. Now I'm going to explain why it would be called the rest stroke. This actually makes sense. The idea is when we pluck the string, our finger plucks, I'm just going to pluck the first string, plucks the string, and then it rested on the next string. You see that? Just rested on the next string. Okay, that gives us a very specific sound, so it's an important technique to get down. The idea with this technique is to get the loudest and warmest sound out of the instrument. If my finger were to pluck the string and not rest on the next string, notice how thin the sound gets. See, I lost some volume there. It's a different sound. Now obviously that works, and there will be instances where we want to do that. We'll have more on that later, but for now, the apoyando technique involves plucking the string and the finger resting on the next string. Important to note as well, you can probably see that when I do the finger picking, I'm pulling my finger towards me. Okay, going this way, we're not going to do that today. That's for some other fancier stuff. It's endless, the different fingering, right hand fingering patterns people have come up with in classical and flamenco guitar. We're just starting with the most standard technique today, and that is now with the apoyando stroke, the finger just pulls the string and comes toward me. Okay, so practicing this technique, what we want to do is alternate the index and middle. That's the most common combination on the index, middle, and annular fingers that I've seen in all my years of playing. The index and middle is the most common combination, just back and forth, index, middle, much like the alternate picking stuff we did earlier with the flat pick going down, up, down, up, down, up. Now we're going to be going index, middle, index, middle, index, middle. It's very important that we alternate when doing something that involves using this technique. The reason why is, if I were to play a note over and over on the guitar using one finger, eventually it just starts to sound like a hammer. It's just, it becomes bombastic. The note gets stale. I can demonstrate. Here's me alternating the index and middle using the Apoyando technique. See, there's somewhat of a natural variation when I do it as I alternate. The two fingers each have a little bit of their own sound, and they're slightly located in a different part of the string. We want that variety, that variation in our tonality, because it keeps the note fresh. I've even seen in the brief amount of time I studied piano, composers like Chopin putting in their music directive to, if you got to play one note repeatedly, to not do this on the piano key, but to alternate the fingers. I was fascinated when I first saw that. It literally was a Chopin piece that said to do this, and that was the reason why, because it's just believed that you just keep hitting that same note over and over with the same finger, it's just going to sound obnoxious. So this Apoyando technique that we're going to work on today involves the resting on the next string, but also alternating. It takes a while to get in the habit of consistently alternating those two fingers, and that's why our first exercise is going to involve just playing one string over and over, doing the Apoyando and alternating the index and middle. Here's our exercise. Rest your thumb on the sixth string. Just rest it there. It helps stabilize the hand. It's not cheating or anything like that. That really does help. I mean, what else are you going to do with your thumb anyway if you're doing this exercise? It's got to go somewhere, right? So just rest it there on the big string. Make sure you've got the arc in the wrist, and then just simply practice doing the index middle pattern over and over, doing the Apoyando technique. The next exercise we're going to do involves crossing over strings 3, 2, and 1. Now let's do an index middle on each one, and we'll just go up and down. Like all exercises, remember to do these in repetitions. So you'll sit down and you'll make sure that you have the proper posture and form, that your hand is located in the right part of the strings, and then just do these in repetitions. Do maybe 4, 5, 6 reps of what I just did. You're doing them in a loop, make it second habit, the way that we hold our hand and the way we do that technique. We could also do that one in reverse. We could start with the high note and go to the low. Okay, next let's do a combination of where we'll play our middle finger on the first string and our index finger on the second string. These actually line up really well. If you look at that image, you see it. You see there in the video the way I'm holding my hand, they line up perfectly. If I do them in reverse, it's kind of awkward. Kind of bends my hand in a funny way. So we'll do index on the second string and the middle on the first. And our pattern just goes middle, index, middle, index. Then we can do that one in reverse. Index, middle. So far we've only been playing strings 3, 2, and 1. Strings 6, 5, and 4 are most commonly played using the thumb, or P, or pulgar. And this involves the thumb going in the opposite direction. We push it down. I'll demonstrate. The thumb plucks, in this case I'm plucking the 6th string, and rests on the next string. But this time it went down. Push it down. I can demonstrate that one too, the alternative, if I didn't do the rest stroke technique. It's a little quieter. Hear the difference? Okay, so same thing then with the thumb. Since it's got to work all 3 of these big strings, let's do some exercises that involve it moving from one string to the next. This exercise is also beneficial. Another thing that I want to point out to watch for when you're double checking to make sure that your technique and your posture is being done correctly is that when you're doing an index middle exercise and you've got the arc in the wrist and your thumb is in position, it's the way the hand should be. Nothing changes when we do the thumb exercises. See that? I didn't change the position at all, but it's really easy to want to do that. I know I did it when I first was learning this. And when I was doing index middle patterns, I'd kind of pull my hand up and do this, and then if I had thumb, I'd do that. It seems crazy, but I've seen so many people gravitate towards doing that. But the way to double check yourself to make sure you're not doing that is to just, again, rest your arm on the high arc on the guitar, elbow back, shoulders relaxed, drop your hand down, pull it up, rest your thumb there, do a few little index middle patterns there, and then when you go to do the thumb, make sure you change nothing. You see, just drop your thumb like that. You don't have to reposition your hand. Okay, so that concludes the first part of this series that I'm going to be doing on finger picking. I hope you learned a lot from that, and if you have any questions on that, feel free to leave a comment in the comment box below. We'll see you next time.